Welcome to the War Room. It's Wednesday, August the 5th, the year of our Lord 2020, here on Capitol Hill with Jack Maxey and Raheem Kassam. Down the line, Stephen K. Bannon joins us on the John Fredericks Radio Network on America's Voice.news, subtitled in Mandarin and blown through the CCP's firewall by G News and GTV, and later on Newsmax 2. Well, there's a lot to cover this morning, not least where we stand pandemic-wise, but also we're going to get into the mail-in voting situation. President Trump clarifying a little bit yesterday on Twitter his position on the mail-in voting situation. We've talked about it before on the show. Bill McGinley will join us to talk about it once again, and it's incredibly important. Politico dropped a story this morning about the Trump campaign knocking on 1 million doors, and the Biden campaign knocking on 0. That's good news as far as the Trump campaign is concerned. But on the flip side of that, the Democrats have been much more heavily focused on the mail-in voting side of things. So we'll bring you the latest on that, the future of TikTok, what's happening with the U.S. economy as the debate continues on Capitol Hill, and more from Brian Colfage and what's going on with the NFL. Jack Max is going to lead us throughout these 2 hours today. But first, over to Stephen K. Bannon.
Yeah, I want to announce this controversy, and now you see the media hitting back on it, calling these great physicians from Yale, Johns Hopkins, and other places right-wing doctors. I want to announce we're going to have a national town hall on Saturday for our 10 o'clock to noon show. We're going to have Dr. Rish, Senator Johnson, a raft of experts on to talk about hydroxy. Guys, what we'd like to start doing now is getting questions, themes, topics that people want to talk about. This is a national town hall on the use of hydroxy. We want to get all the issues on the table. It's incredibly important that the Trump administration take action on this. I call this the pandemic primary, and President Trump right now is running against the Fauci-Hahn ticket in the primary. He's got to beat that, and I think there's enough evidence out there about hydroxy chloroquine being a use as a prophylactic and a preventative from some of the top scientists around the country. We're going to get into all the issues, the legal issues, the technical issues, the medical issues. A national town hall on the use of hydroxy. That's going to be Saturday, 10 to noon. Also, we're going to be playing it all over the weekend. I want to thank the team at AVN, John Fredericks Radio Network, all our producers. We'll be announcing more about that later today up on our site, tweeting out who else is going to be on there, and of course, tomorrow. So, guys, very important. I know Jack's been all over this. This is a huge issue. Raheem, I want to walk through, and Jack, around the world of what's going on in the pandemic. Certain things are happening right now. We've got, we're going to talk about the vote by mail, which is all driven by the pandemic. Jason Trenner's going to be on, as Raheem said, about this economic inferno that's right in front of us and what's happening on Capitol Hill in the White House to get this, what I call the relief package number 4 done. Remember, these relief packages come at a huge cost. We'll talk all about that with Jason Trennert. Guys, Raheem, walk us through Europe and the rest of the world, and then Jack, I want to get your sense of where we are right now with the pandemic here in the United States.
Well, there's a lot of tinkering around the edges now in Europe. The news coming out of Germany this morning is that they claim the second wave has already hit Germany. Medical representatives of the state of Germany and the Marburger Bund Medical Association are saying, which is the source of some confusion over here in the United States as well. We'll get that from Jack Maxey and find out what's happening in terms of waves over here. The Italians claiming that nearly 1.5 million people have antibodies.
Raheem, before you leave Germany, what about this march on Sunday? The mainstream media over there saying there's 20,000 people. I believe it was driven by about masks in other situations in Germany that they're trying to clamp down. People I know in Germany in the political movement, they said it was anywhere from 200,000 to 2 million. That this was a massive demonstration about people are tired of the direction they're taking over there. What's the truth about that?
The truth is, like in any of these situations, like the rallies that we've seen all across London in the past and so forth, that the number tends to be somewhere in between official police estimates, which, as you say, with this Germany one in particular, I think the uppermost that the state was giving was 20,000, as you say, organizers and others saying far more than that, hundreds of thousands, if not more than that. The truth was, it's not even necessarily the size. Once you get to those numbers like 20,000, that's still a massive number of people people to have out on the streets protesting against something like this. And the quote at the time being "Masks make us slaves" was the mantra at this Berlin protest. But Steve, that's absolutely correct to put your finger on this, and this is going on all across Europe. These arcane rules that people mandatory mask mandates, but only in certain cities in France. Now there are rules on where you can have sex in the United Kingdom, in the north of England. The authorities saying that people who live together, who cohabit, can have relations in their own, not in their own house, but in hotels and bed and breakfast. And there's all sorts of just strange rules that the scientific and medical establishment are coming up with across Europe right now. And I think you're going to see far more of this. Maybe it was 20,000, maybe it was 100,000, maybe it was 500,000 in Berlin over this past weekend. But you're going to start seeing more and more of that all the way across Europe. And I just want to make mention of this as well, because I wanted Jack Maxey's take on this. Nearly 1.5 million people in Italy have the coronavirus antibodies. A new study that was released in the last 24 hours is saying that's about, I think, 15 times higher than, 6 times higher than the number of people who actually tested positive for COVID-19. So 1.5 million people they're saying have the antibodies, Jack.
Well, you're seeing various doctors make these estimations around the world. For example, there was also some information showing that Sweden has about the same antibody rate as does Italy. Now, one of the problems with testing for the antibodies is we know that there are many people who have been infected who do not necessarily test for antibodies. This does not mean that they do not have some residual ability to fight disease, because their T cells will retain a kind of copy of the infected virus and can respond without necessarily having antibodies in your plasma. This has been one of the questions concerning even the vaccinations. Will a single vaccination provide enough immunity? Most of the people now, Moderna, the guys from Oxford, are talking about potentially as many as 3 separate jabs to get you up to immunity. But one of the things that is interesting, you're watching Italy, their death rate has significantly declined. Italy is one of those countries that has started using HCQ very early. And in Sweden, for example, there's a lot of debate now. We've discussed Sweden many, many times concerning their approach, which was to put the responsibility for social distancing and maintaining the right behavior on the backs of the people rather than on the backs of the state. They seem to have been largely completely through their process now. They only have a couple hundred infections in any given day. Their death rate has declined. And just like the United States, most of the victims in Sweden were in elderly care facilities, almost the same exact percentage that we have had. And I think as we look at the global situation, particularly in the Western countries, Australia, Western Europe, we're seeing this replicated everywhere. Almost no matter how strenuous people were on the lockdown, we see most of the victims inside this core group of elderly. And also what we're seeing, Steve, too, is you've seen some of these countries that have done tremendous lockdown, Australia being a perfect example. Well, Australia just had its highest number of cases in a single day yesterday. They're talking about shutting down Victoria entirely again. These things are having massive economic consequences around the world, and this is one of the reasons we're seeing protests in Germany, and you're seeing individual protest movements around the United States and most Western countries. Raheem?
Well, we'll throw it back to Steve, see if there's anywhere else we want to take it here.
Yeah, but Jack, I want to focus right now, but go back to plasma and the Trump administration. The Trump administration is very focused on vaccines. You've got this, you've got the Project Warp Speed, which is kind of the Manhattan Project here. We're going to talk about hydroxy later, but you've got hydroxy, which is a therapeutic, particularly early stage as a prophylactic or preventative early on. They put all the chips on the table about this vaccine, but talk to me about plasma. They also seem to have a new emphasis on this whole issue of plasma.
Plasma, to me, is extremely interesting, Steve, because what's old is new again. This was the approach that was taken by the doctors in 1918, and it was done almost all around the country, really with very limited controls. This were individual doctors spitting out the plasma, hoping that the antibodies, which they were not necessarily, did not conceive of the same way that we do today, but they'd been using plasma therapies and some other disease functions for several years by this time. And we're doing the same thing. Now, the interesting thing about the plasma therapy is that there are risks associated with it. The Mayo Clinic is the one that really is leading the effort, and it requires that all of the patients sign a release form, etc. This plasma therapy has had some benefit, but it's not exactly something that we've done a double-blind study on or anything like that. But like I said, this is a science that is a century old at this point, and we are seeing benefit, but it's really going to people who are already hospitalized. There is some talk that the Mayo Clinic is going to try and do a study where, let's say, you were exposed, your housemate had COVID-19 and got very sick, and they're talking about providing plasma even for people who have been exposed to the disease as a prophylaxis. I do think that there is a positivity here with this, but I don't think it's a solution necessarily. Plus the fact it means that we're going to have to take plasma donations from all of the recovered to try and get it to the sick. I think really where we're going to see the plasma used for the most part is for hospitalized patients. Certainly you can't give somebody a transfusion on an outpatient basis. So this therapy is going to, I believe, be used for mostly the sickest patients unless they can get it somewhere in a systematic level where these transfusions can be distributed around the country more widely. But I do think that there's some interesting thing. The Mayo Clinic says convalescent plasma therapy carries the risk of allergic reactions, lung damage and difficulty breathing, transmissions of infections, including HIV, hepatitis B and C. The risk of these infections is very low because donated blood goes through the FDA, but they are making people sign waivers to be able to participate in the plasma therapy. And when we talk about HCQ, it does make you wonder why we couldn't have waivers for patients to take HCQ on the same basis. Steve, back to you.
Well, look, this is why we're going to do the national town hall on Saturday. I don't know if you guys are setting up a hashtag, but hashtag War and Pandemic are in the live stream right now. Please get us all your questions, your topics. We're the top people in the country. We want to bring this to a head. We're going to continue to force this because, as remember, there's no political registration on your death certificate. There's no Democrat or Republican. It's not your Bernie supporter or your supporter of President Trump. This is about American citizens and folks living in this country, obviously throughout the world. But we've got to get focused on how we stop the combat casualties that the CCP virus has brought us. And to me, it's absolutely ridiculous that we're not looking at every possible and potential therapy here. We should be aggressive in these things. This is emergency use authorization. That's what we're talking about. So that's why we're going to have a national town hall 10 to noon on Saturday. Want to get all your questions, all your comments, all your observations so we can put them in the mix on the top people in the country. Here we're going to have more announcements today and tomorrow about all of it. But guys, I think that this is what, President Trump's an entrepreneur. Now's the time to start acting like an entrepreneur. You've got to be an entrepreneur on this.
Steve, we've got to go to a break here. When we come back, Bill McGinley, former White House Cabinet Secretary, will join us to discuss the mail-in voting situation. Jack Maxey, Raheem Kassam, Stephen K. Bannon. Hashtag War Room Pandemic for your views returns in a moment.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Well, 2020's been a gut punch to American business, and that punch is going to get even harder in the coming months. What you need to succeed is NetSuite by Oracle, the world's #1 cloud business system. Get your free guide right now at netsuite.com/Bannon. You're back in the War Room Wednesday, August 5th. Vish Bora, Jack Maxey, Raheem Kassam, Stephen K. Bannon, and Bill McGinley joining us on the line. Over to you, Steve.
Yeah, we'd like to give you tomorrow's news today. We've talked about this now, I think, for 2 months. We realized in this pandemic, the world's turned upside down. You talk about a gut punch. Next segment, we're going to have Jason Trennert on talk about this fiasco going on at Capitol Hill between $1 trillion, $3 trillion, these massive numbers all over the place. One of the things we focused on a couple of months ago with people like Jim Schultz and our guest Bill McGinley was not voting on election day, but actually voting prior to election day and not with absentee ballots, with potentially mail-in ballots. Now it looks like it's becoming a reality. How confusing this is the confusing message has been coming out everywhere. The campaign, the White House, the RNC, no uniformity. But more importantly, how confusing, even Jonathan Swan, in which the mainstream media is saying, is the epic interview of President Trump in his first term. Even he got the details. He got the technical part and the key part just dead wrong, so much so, Raheem, that he came out and apologized for it, which I thought was pretty smart, because when I saw it, I said, gosh, I think he's wrong on that thing, and he didn't catch himself. Raheem, what did Jonathan Swan actually say, and how did he apologize to try to undo what he had kind of, not tripped up the president, but just gotten the facts pretty wrong?
Right, and Jonathan Swan is a reporter at Axios, and he tweeted after this interview, quote, "When I interviewed POTUS, I said the mail-in voting materials people receive are applications, not ballots. That's overwhelmingly the case, but not universally so, e.g. California and now, brackets, post-taping, Nevada. I should have used more precise language, and I'm sorry for the mistake." Steve, even the apology is confusing as heck. So,
Bill McGinley, tell us where, I know the president tweeted out this morning, CNN, MSNBC's in full meltdown. You're one of the experts in this area, and you highlighted this months ago. It was going to be an issue, a massive issue, driven by this pandemic. Where are we today? What has the president recommended, and how is Election Day going to take place, particularly given fiascos, I think, last night in Michigan and this ongoing fiasco in the Democratic primary in New York?
Yeah, I think the one thing to remember, and this is a great credit to War Room Pandemic and you, Steve, and how the call to action that people need to take responsibility for a lot of things that are happening in their lives and not to be victims. And that is what we discussed prior, which is own your vote. The president's tweet yesterday where he signaled to everybody in Florida, hey, the absentee ballot system, the mail-in voting system in Florida, we've looked at it. It's safe. It's secure. You should absolutely use it. To me, was a significant change in messaging from the campaign and was really the starting gun for the general election this fall. And I think it's a good call to action for the president to make. I think he needs to repeat it in the other battleground states, because we need to energize the deplorables in the base to make sure that they are making plans so that their vote is counted. And if they have any questions about whether there's going to be bad weather or the pandemic's going to be spiking in their state, they need to educate themselves about the voting rules in their states, order their absentee ballots early so that they can monitor and make sure they receive them, fill them out properly, take the time, make sure that you sign it, comply with the rules of your state, and get it back. And doing so helps not only bank your vote so that you're sure that your voice is heard in this process, but it also helps the campaign, because then they can take you off the list and start focusing on the other people that they need to turn out to the polls in this turnout election.
So tell me, Jonathan Swan, made this mistake the other day and then came back and apologized, but as Raheem says, it was a qualified apology. Where do we actually stand in states like Florida? Because I think people kind of understand the absentee ballot, but they don't understand this mail by vote, if actually applications are going to be sent out or actually ballots are going to be sent out. Can you tell us, and it looks like obviously it's going to be limited national uniformity in this, because obviously the states all run their own elections. Where do you think we stand in some of these big states? And let's take particularly Florida. Why did the president have this kind of change of heart that all of a sudden now he's saying, hey, everything's fine, which I understand he's getting lit up on MSNBC and CNN, is just picking the battleground states that he needs to win?
Because I think there was some confusion in the base. Obviously, the campaign and other political advisors were starting to see evidence that a lot of the Republicans who historically would vote absentee ballots maybe were hesitating or questioning whether or not that was a viable avenue to cast their ballot. And it was clear that the president wanted to clarify this for his supporters in that state. Remember, you can't change the election rules 90 days before an election. This is an election administration issue. The election officials, which are bureaucrats, are creatures of habit. They've been doing these voting systems for decades. And when the Democratic legislators and others come in and say, we're going to completely conduct a wholesale change of how this election is going to be conducted, it raises questions of training, it raises questions of infrastructure, it raises questions of funding about how it's going to happen. And transparency is the key here. If the Democratic legislators and some of these Democratic officials decide to wholesale change the system, trust me, they're not going to accept the blame if they have a meltdown on Election Day or during the election process. They're going to point the fingers at the election officials and run for cover. We're seeing this in New York right now with the congressional primaries that are still hotly contested, where we're weeks, and I think it's upwards of 4 to 6 weeks afterwards, they're still fighting over which ballots should be counted in these primary elections. And remember, this is a primary, so this is Democrat versus Democrat, where they're already seeing these issues, and they don't even know the universe of ballots that are going to determine the winner of the primary election. This is a significant issue, and we really want to make sure that we don't have this at the general election on November 3rd.
Listen, guys, it's Jack Maxey. I wanted to put something in here. Hillary Clinton posted a tweet last night where she says she's talking about mail delivery delays. She quotes an article from the Philadelphia Inquirer. She cites it. But she says, I fear Republican sabotage of the United States Postal Service, including slowing mail delivery, is a Trump strategy to make voting by mail more difficult this fall. Request your ballots and return them as early as you can. So here we have Hillary Clinton implying that the President of the United States is sabotaging the United States Postal Service for the election.
Bill, I want to get your response to that, but I want to contextualize it even further. Over the last couple of weeks, we've seen this transition integrity project. I don't know if that's crossed over your radar, but this is a, quote, bipartisan organization, so they call it. We dug a little bit into it. Turns out the bipartisan part of it was Michael Steele and Bill Kristol being a part of this. And as a part of that war game that this organization, which is linked to the Soros and Gates Foundation, as part of their war game, their election war game, we saw John Podesta playing Joe Biden and refusing to accept the results of the election, taking it to the House, taking it to the Senate. Inevitably, it would end up with the Supreme Court. And then in the war game scenario, it went to the military to start deciding as to who they were going to recognize as the commander in chief. Now, the media has been glorifying this war game in this organization. You just heard from Jack Maxey about how the Democrats are already laying the foundation to try and challenge this, even though they are the ones pushing for the mail-in voting. Bill, so tell me, it seems to me that these guys, in terms of their strategy, in terms of their tactics surrounding mail-in voting and the quote-unquote fraud that goes on around it, they're actually leagues ahead of that as well, are they not?
Yeah. So let's actually correct the narrative here that the media and the Democrats have been laying. First of all, the Democratic lawyers that are filing the lawsuits across the country and engaged in these big think projects like the one you just referenced, these guys are not on the side of angels. These aren't principled stands that they're taking for the betterment of America. These guys are partisan warriors that are positioning their clients and their favorite candidates for post-election litigation. They are laying the groundwork for any voter lawsuits or other post-election litigation that they're going to have to engage in to make sure that their clients win or their favorite candidate comes out on top. And this is what the media is not talking about, and I wish the campaign would start talking about. These lawyers who are conducting all the lawsuits across the nation, their posture in a post-election recount or election contest is going to be driven by whether their candidate is ahead in the vote total, which means they're going to be in a defensive posture, or they're going to be under the vote total and losing, which will be an offensive posture. That's going to drive the tactics that they're going to take, both in terms of the administrative process for the recounts and reviewing the ballots, but also all of the lawsuits that they're going to be filing. This is not going to be something that's going to be driven by partisanship or some high-minded ideal that they're trying to communicate right now. It's going to be raw litigation, raw fight to try and determine who wins these elections, right? And so these guys are actually being pretty smart about it. Let's pay a compliment to them. They laid out a strategy months ago, if not a year ago, to try and take all these lawsuits, to try and position themselves, gather the information that they need so that if this is a close election, they can walk into the courthouse, walk into the county registrar, go to the Secretary of State or a recount board, and start making arguments. They've been conducting discovery, they've been gathering information, and they're going to use it to their partisan advantage. They are not on the side of angels because they are going to be there. You just wait and see. If they have to knock out ballots or challenge ballots to ensure Joe Biden wins or a Democratic candidate wins, they are going to pivot on a dime and start arguing signature mismatch.
Yes.
That the information doesn't vote the registration rolls.
Bill, we've got 30 seconds here.
Accusing Republicans of.
Bill, we've got 30 seconds here before the break. Steve, do we want to hold Bill over to the next segment?
Yeah, I want to hold Bill over.
Yeah,
I got one more question. Bill, and then we'll bring in Jason also.
As do I. Bill, if you could hang over the break, we'd love to wrap up with you in the next segment here on War Room Pandemic. Jack Maxey, Raheem Kassam, Stephen K. Bannon, Bill McGinley, Jason Trennert joins us after the break to talk about the next and the new and the continuing and the worsening economic inferno. Hashtag War Room Pandemic returns in just a moment.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Well, if you're going to succeed when you come back from this pandemic as America reopens for business, you're going to need NetSuite by Oracle, the world's #1 cloud business system. Whether you're doing $1 million or hundreds of millions in sales, NetSuite lets you manage every penny with precision. You have the agility to compete with anyone, work from anywhere, and run your whole company right from your phone. Over 20,000 companies use NetSuite, so join them today. You can start off by getting a free guide. 7 actions businesses need to take now. That's at netsuite.com/Bannon. They surveyed hundreds of business leaders and put all the plays they're using into that playbook. That's netsuite.com/Bannon. You can also get a free product tour. We're back in the War Room. Jack Maxey, Raheem Kassam, over to Stephen K. Bannon.
Yeah, Bill, if you were able to talk to the campaign today, what would be the 2 or 3 action steps you think they have to take today, given what you teed up before the break about how the Democrats are all over the country already working on this?
I would supercharge the turnout message from the campaign and make sure that the air war or the messaging actually matches the ground war that the campaign is engaged in. We've seen recent reports that they've got over 1,500 volunteers across the country for the turnout machine and that they've made over 1 million door knocks. They need to make sure that both of these components of the campaign are aligned. They need to alter the messaging so that it doesn't sound like it's anti-mail-in voting, anti-absentee balloting, eliminate the confusion, and make sure that the messaging coming out of the campaign is pro-vote, pro-turnout, and pro-process, and that the reason that the campaign and the RNC are taking an aggressive posture to monitor what's happening in the states and to file the lawsuits to correct the process where there's flaws is because they're trying to protect the vote, not trying to deny it. This is a pro-vote message that the Trump campaign and the RNC need to be putting out and supercharge their supporters to get to the polls, bank their votes.
Okay, last question. How do people, you've had this great mantra, own your vote. Tell our audience right now how they step up as a responsible citizen, own their vote, and help their family and friends to own their votes.
That's right. First thing you need to do is go to your Secretary of State's website. Don't rely on the Democratic message machine for information about voting procedures. Go to the source and read it for yourself. Educate yourself about the voting rules in your state. Understand when the absentee ballot windows open, what the process is for requesting it. And in a couple of states where you still have to have an excuse, make sure you satisfy that excuse. Request your ballot, get it in early. You need to turn around and you need to call 5 to 10 family members and friends that you know support the president and the Republican Party and tell them to get out and vote. You should be a force multiplier and an extension of the campaign to turn out the vote. If we all do our job, we're going to win in November. If we sit on our laurels and just complain about the process, the president's got a problem. So be part of the solution. Don't be part of the problem. And let's turn out the vote and win this thing in November.
Bill McGinley, former cabinet secretary, thank you very much. One of the smartest guys in the White House and a fantastic guy about everything dealing with elections. Really appreciate it. Raheem, you talk about the economic inferno. You talk about the turbulent times. Now we're even talking about how do you figure out what this vote's going to be? Is it going to be mail-in? Is it going to be absentee? Are people going to go stand in line? Obviously, you have to own your vote. One of the best guys to help us think through the economic inferno part that we've had on, even from the war room impeachment days, Jason Trennert from Strategis. Jason, what's happening on Capitol Hill? I think people are very confused now. You've got Mitch McConnell and the Republicans and some segment of the Republicans saying, hey, we don't know if anything should be done here. Mitch McConnell's also talking about, which we talked about, I think 3 or 4 months ago, the key concept, you have to get the liability situation sorted out for business. You got Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats still talking about over $3 trillion. And then you've got the White House is kind of ill-formed of where exactly they are. Can you help the audience think through exactly where we are and how important is this next relief package? Can the economy recover without having another $1 trillion plus relief or some sort of changes to the liability law?
Steve, the answer is that the economy. The quick answer is the economy could recover, but it would take a long time to get back to where you were. It's still going to take a long time to get back to where you were in terms of the level of GDP or level of corporate profits. In my opinion, another relief package is a must-have. I think there are some Republicans that believe that because we've seen some very big increases in employment, that another package isn't necessary. I think they're wrong. The reason why you're seeing increases in employment is because of the aid package. Now, it's not. I am a small government person that believes that the best allocators of capital are free markets. But if you're making a decision to shut down large parts of the economy, the only way the economy can do what it's doing now, which is hanging in there, is by relief from the federal government. And so it's a very, very difficult position that you're in if you're a free market person like myself. My own opinion is we're going to get another payroll employment number this Friday, and I think that will focus the mind on some of the Republican senators who are holding out on a stimulus package, because I feel very strongly that you're not going to see the incremental increases in employment that you saw in the last 2 months. You're still about 15 million people short of where you were, the number of people that were employed on payrolls in February, off 150 million person base. So I think both politically and in some ways from a humanitarian point of view, another package is necessary.
So what do you say in this package? If you were advising the president, what do you think are the 3 or 4 things they must focus on to reach some sort of compromise and get this thing done? Where would you put the emphasis?
Well, listen, I think, Steve, I mean, let's just be honest here. There's no package that's $1.5 trillion, $2 trillion that is not a not insignificant part of it will be a waste of money. And it's just the way the system works. By the same token, you do have to keep people, if you're denying them the ability to work or open their businesses or open them in a way that's consistent with that making money, you have to give people aid. So liability insurance is absolutely critical, so that businesses can make their own decisions and have an ability to open up the way they would normally. I think that is a critical part. I think the White House is right on that. I think the Republicans are right on that. Unfortunately, you're going to have to give something in return. And again, that's going to be things like, the U.S. Post Office and other things that, I think free market people, wouldn't be thrilled about. But the liability insurance, to answer your question directly, is probably key. And I also think my own opinion is that jawboning on the part of the administration to say that this is not sustainable to keep the economy closed like this indefinitely is important, because the best medicine for the economy will be to get the economy moving again and getting people back into a more normal life that is sustainable. This is not sustainable, and it's resulting, in my opinion, in a lot of social problems, other problems that have their own costs.
Jason, I know that you're the overall leader of your firm and one of the smartest guys on Wall Street. Many people depend on you for your insights, and you have guys that work for you and on your staff that deal with the minutia of these bills. But here's the thing I don't understand. I think that like the liability section seems to be so important to sort things out and how we move forward, not just in a short period of time, but overall in dealing with this pandemic as it kind of rolls out and potentially for a second wave. You hear Mitch McConnell saying it's actually a sine qua non for him to approve a bill. Yet I hear mixed messaging out of the White House. I think the president the other day or somebody said it's just not a priority. That's what, and you're coming up on the unemployment insurance that ran out last week, the evictions. Do you see some way to get some sort of interim bill that Nancy Pelosi agrees to on the unemployment side and deal with the bigger issues later, or is she just going to sit there and rope-a-dope and essentially bleed out the president over the next couple of weeks as these unemployment numbers continue to get worse?
Yeah, I mean, Steve, I don't know much about the politics about this, but I think the Democrats have some leverage here. And if you could do a deal that would just extend the unemployment benefits, I think from a political point of view, that is absolutely critical. And I think it's going to be very difficult let's be frank about it, it's going to be very difficult for the president to win if those benefits aren't extended. Liability is a very, very crucial part in getting back to some normal type of economic activity that allows business people to open up their businesses. But by the same token, if you don't get reelected, we're going to have other problems, particularly as it relates to Biden's economic plan, which, in my opinion, would be an absolute disaster for investors and for the economy. So it's a very, very difficult situation. Now, the Democrats need state and local funding, so it's not like the Democrats have all the cards. But getting the unemployment insurance benefits extended, I think, is critical. If they could do it piecemeal, I would take it and then work on the liability insurance later, just from a political point of view. But liability insurance from a longer-term health of the economy perspective is very, very important.
We just got a couple minutes. I just want overall, given I know you never thought we'd be in a situation where we're talking about a fourth relief package, and the bid and the ask is $1 trillion to $3.2 trillion.
Yeah.
Given the amount of money we're putting on the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve, this bazooka to prop up assets, given these deficits we're running with these relief packages, I call them these spans in the bridge, the railroad bridge to get us across it. What do you think the overall impact's going to be to the economy in years to come? Let's get past November, right? What do you think the overall economy, the impact's going to be just on the amount of debt that we're incurring right now to get through this?
Well, Steve, we have the benefit, they call it, economists call it the exorbitant privilege of having a reserve currency. So the simple answer is we can get away with this bad behavior for now. The problem, though, is as you're seeing already, is that the dollar is weakening meaningfully. Gold is appreciating. TIPS, inflation-protected bonds are appreciating meaningfully. So what you're seeing is a very disjointed, I would say, allocation of capital, where you're essentially giving capital to companies that are trading at crazy earnings multiples, and you're also giving money to something like gold and inflation protection. The bottom line is the more the government is involved in the economy, the worse capital allocation gets. It also tends to, if you're worried about income inequality, which seems a reasonable thing to worry about, I would say all of this economic intrusion on the part of the government makes it worse. It doesn't make it better. Large companies are generally the biggest beneficiaries from large government. It's small businesses that don't have the access to the levers of power that get hurt the most when government expands. And so that, to me, is a critical, if you want the economy to be fair, you want everyone to have a shot, you want to get the government out of the way as quickly as possible. It's not to say the government doesn't have a role to play, but this year our deficit will be about 100% of the budget of the United States government. 100% of that $3.8 trillion will be the deficit this year.
Guys, we got to bounce.
It's not sustainable.
Steve, we got to.
Jason, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking time away today to join us.
Jason Trennert there. We're very grateful for Jason and Steve in that segment. Incredibly enlightening. Jack Maxey, Raheem Kassam, hashtag War Room Pandemic returns in just a moment with more conversation. We'll take on what's going on with TikTok and the stimulus again after the break.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Welcome back to the War Room. I want to pass it over now to Stephen K. Bannon.
Yeah, you've seen we try to bring the top experts on in the country every day to talk to you about this pandemic, the economic inferno, the financial capital markets crisis it triggered, and the geopolitical crisis. Today we've been talking about a whole different way that Americans may end up voting in a national election. Then we bring in one of Wall Street's top guys to talk about this huge bid in the ass that are up there on Capitol Hill right now. $1 trillion to $3 trillion on the fourth relief bill. Now's the time that you got to think about precious metals in your portfolio. And the reason is, if you think we've had uncertainty in the last 9 months, you haven't seen anything. There's going to be global chaos coming, and this is because driven by the Chinese Communist Party, driven by trying to break the American dollar off of the reserve currency. This is going to be the next 10 years are going to be some of the toughest 10 years in history, and you've got to start thinking about adding precious metals to your portfolio. Go to Bannon, Bannon 474747, and get from Birch Gold, the guys from Birch Gold, get their 20-page report that'll walk you through this. If you're thinking about gold or precious metals, the guys you have to think about, the team at Birch Gold. Jack, I know you've got some breaking news on a new endorsement about Joe Biden, talking about turbulent times. Joe Biden just got a great shout out, didn't he?
Joe Biden just got endorsed by the Revolutionary Communist Party of the United States. They claim that normally they would not support something like a bourgeoisie election because revolution is their aim. But because the Republican administration led by Donald Trump and Pence is so fascist on an unprecedented level, they are now endorsing Joe Biden because we will get to revolution quicker through Biden than we will with Donald Trump because his fascists repress their people.
Listen, I think this goes back to why the president's got to continue action. This is about action, driven from the Oval Office. We're going to have a town hall on Saturday. I want all the hashtag War Room Pandemic posse. We want everybody in the live stream. Everybody goes to our Twitter to start giving us topics, give us subjects you want to cover in the hydroxy war, to give us people that you'd like to see on. Also give us questions. We want your questions. We want them now. So go to hashtag War Room Pandemic. It's a national town hall on Saturday, 10 a.m. to noon. Normally we do issues coming out of China. Today we're going to talk about a potential, not a cure for the Chinese Communist Party virus, but maybe a preventative, maybe a prophylactic. And we're going to have an in-depth discussion with people like Dr. Risch, Senator Johnson, and others that we're going to announce over today and tomorrow. But in these uncertain times, also, you've got to take action, like Bill McGinley said. Got to be concise messaging, but the messaging's got to be around action, and those actions about owning your vote, and really about the Trump campaign focusing on the get out the vote effort and telling everybody, hey, you've got to vote, not to downplay this vote. However it's going to be, we're going to have to deal with the rules, as I'm sure some of these local state governments and Democrats are going to make them up as they go along. You're just going to have to deal with it. And you also have to get a legal force out there, as Bill McGinley said, to get on top of it. In addition, I completely agree with what Jason's saying, and actually Senator McConnell, is that to look at this pandemic and to go forward, we got to get this liability situation. It has to be dealt with. We talked about this on the show, I think, 3 months ago. Until you get that, things like hydroxy and getting the liability insurance situation sorted will allow us to get back to some sort of level of normality. And that's what everybody's looking for. Look, guys, you jump in here, and Jack, particularly you know, this virus is not going away anytime soon. Dr. Yan is part of that group that's absolutely adamant that this is a man-enhanced virus, a man-enhanced virus. And so this thing's not going away anytime soon. We haven't even hit the second wave yet. We're still in the first wave. We've got to learn how to be smarter than this. That's why things like using hydroxy as a prophylactic, now that's backed up by medical and scientific support, and things like the liability insurance to give us some sort of structural components that allow us to get back to normality. Jack, Raheem, love to hear your ideas and concepts on this.
I agree with you, Steve. I think one of the most amazing things about HCQ as a potential drug in this combat that we're engaged in is that it has potential use as a prophylactic. I think that is maybe the key thing, and we're seeing evidence that has worked in that regard in India particularly. There was some evidence that just came out a few weeks ago where they had offered it to 10,000 police officers in Mumbai because of Fauci, because of the FDA. About 40% of them declined to take the drug. Now, of all the officers who got sick, they had 2 people taking the drug who got sick, but they had very mild symptoms. And in the group that did not take the drug, they had several deaths. I mean, to me, some of this is just so obvious. And what irks me more than anything is this idea that we're required to do double-blind studies in the midst of a pandemic. I want our listeners to notice there are not any double-blind studies going on with these vaccines that they're going to require all of us take in 6 or 7 months.
Wait, stop. Say that again. Because these guys, whether it's on television, whether it's Fauci, they're all claiming, hey, they're moving the goalposts. We talked about that yesterday, the randomized control, et cetera, et cetera. Just be absolutely clear. The rules they're saying have to apply for HCQ are not the same rules they're applying for the vaccine.
No, they are not the same rules that they're applying for the vaccine under any circumstances. In fact, Moderna has even said that even though they're going to do the 30,000 initial group to study, they're not going to actually infect any of the people who've taken the vaccine with the COVID-19. They're just going to throw the dice and hope that one of them maybe or doesn't maybe get sick with it. So this is something that is being done on a lot of faith basis rather than the same kind of scientific criteria that Fauci deems the gold standard for other medical drugs.
How does the good faith basis work for the flu vaccine?
Well, the flu vaccine is an interesting thing, and I think it has a great bearing on what we're going to see going forward here with the potential vaccine for the CCP virus. We know that the influenza vaccine does not particularly work very well on people over 60, 65. We also know that these are the people most at risk of dying for COVID-19. So this major push for a vaccine which may or may not work pretty clearly probably will not work that well on the population that needs it most.
All right, we got to bounce into the next hour. We're getting more into the CCP and its allies. War Room Pandemic returns with Jack Maxey, Stephen K. Bannon, Raheem Kassam in just a moment.